Yo, welcome back to another video. Now in today's video we have a brand new interaction. This is something that I have wanted to do for a while, but I've been waiting for the nose familiar to be fixed, and he is finally fixed now so he can work properly. And this is one of the combinations I thought of at the start, but I couldn't showcase it properly because of, like I said, nose familiar was broken. So this is going over Ragna. Ragna is one of my favorite units in the game because of his kit and how he works. First off, let's go into how this unit works. So he freezes on hit, and every attack he increases his own damage by 10% up to 40%. So he needs to attack 4 times to max out this damage. His second passive, anytime this unit is placed, all the buffs previous placement get applied to it, and it doesn't count towards any cap. So it can be unlimited amount of damage buff, which is crazy. And then for the third passive, what happens is whenever a unit does get placed, the existing placement of the unit on the field gets deleted and the placement limit does not get reduced. So he has 4 placement limits, so meaning that you can kind of stack up buffs 4 times. And what we are going to be doing is showcasing him with the nose familiar and the witch, and then I'll also do a little showcase showing you the limits of how high we can get his damage buff up with 6 slots. And then I might as well at the end show off how crazy we can go with stacking with unlimited amount of units. So first off, let's look at the familiar that I am using. I am using a 33.4% damage increase nose familiar. Now in my showcase I did say that this can be increased all the way up to 40% as the non-corrupted version, but it's actually up to 35%, so this is a pretty high one. It's not corrupted right now, so I could potentially get a good corruption 3 on it and try get anything higher, but for now we're just going with a 33%. And then we have Witch, the other main unit that is a part of this combo, and what she does is if an ally is stunned, boost their damage by 50% for the duration of the stun. And now this pairs well with Nose because Nose makes them self-stun, and so pair those two together and they can produce a lot of damage buff. So right now he's at 40% increased damage. After he attacks, he should increase his damage up quite a lot, and during this time, missed out my time, you do want to place the next Ragna while he is stunned so you can get the most amount of damage buff out of him as well, because otherwise it won't work properly. So right now we will wait until the nose damage buff goes away. Okay, on the next attack we will place down our Ragna. There we go. We placed it down, so now he should have gotten both of those buffs, and now we need to stack him up again. So that's his second attack right there. There's his third attack, and now his fourth attack. And I just want to make sure that he has both his buffs up. There we go. So now we do it one more time. There we go. And now this, after he has fully built himself up, this should be the highest amount of damage buff that he can get with these two familiar and unit alone, which is absolutely insane to see, by the way. 8 times damage multiplier with 1 singular unit slot and a familiar added onto him. This is never seen before in the game so far with this unit. So he's at a 9.3 times multiplier. Now this is stuns, so he's actually not going to be dealing that damage. He's going to be mainly dealing this damage at the 8.46, or I think it can slightly be higher. Let's see, 8.8. So 8.8 is the highest damage multiplier that he's actually attacking on. The 9.3 is just happened during the stun duration, so he's not actually attacking for that. If we go ahead and max him out, he's at 255,000 damage with a nose and witch. How insane is that? Now you can see the potential of this combo. What we are going to do next is go into seeing how high we can get it with only 6 unit slots alone. Alright, so what we are going to be doing is, for this, we are looking for the highest buffers in the game, and we're also going to look for any range buffers, because range buffers are very good. Firstly, what we are going to be bringing in is the Smith, because Smith is perfect for him when it comes to lowering his SPA. I believe I might have my Fu familiar on him as well, which is perfect. The other unit that we want to bring along is a Kaguya. I'm actually going to bring along my non-leveled Kaguya, so she isn't dealing all the damage. And then we have 2 more unit slots. We are going to bring in Astolfo because Astolfo is a good range and damage buffer. And then for our final slot, let's see what I have available to me. All right, I nearly completely forgot about him, but of course, our other high damage buff support that we have in the game that just came out is Griffith. Griffith is a 40% buffer. So we have a 40% buffer with Smith. We have a 45% buffer with Kaguya. We have a 40% damage buffer and 20% range buffer with Astolfo. Astolfo, and we have a 40% damage buffer with Griffith. And then we have a 50% buffer with Witch, and we're getting 33% buff off the nose and 40% from his own passive. So you can see where this is going to go. He is going to scale up crazy. Oh, actually, I take back what I said with the Smiths. We are going to be using the Sword of Actuation, so it's a 20% buff and a 10% SPA buff, which is, in my opinion, a lot better than just only putting 40% damage on him. So let me go ahead and showcase my first stacking of him, and then after that, I will show you at the end what I would need to do. The first thing that I need to do is get my Griffith to his light form. Easiest way in a sandbox is to just click the skip wave button and easily go through it. Now we do need to wait a couple seconds so we can do the eclipse once again. I think if I skip during this, yep, there we go. And now he is in his Falcon of Light form. So right now, once we go ahead and place down our Ragna, as you can see, he is already getting the 40% buff. Now he is going to be branded, so I'm not too sure how he is going to work when it comes to getting hit by an enemy. It will be interesting, but hopefully we have enough other units that should be fine to be able to not worry about it too much. Next up, we are going to get our Astolfo up. The easiest way we can do this is I will actually cheat the system a little bit and bring in some preset modifier cards so I can skip having to wait for all of the cooldowns. What we'll do is just skip a bunch of waves to spawn in a bunch of enemies, do the Hippogriff, skip a bit more waves, and then we'll use his spear, and hopefully, okay, that did not buff it enough, so we'll do it once again, and we'll just move him ever so slightly again, and then hopefully this should be enough for a spellbook on Ragna. There we go. That is the 40% and 20% buff on Ragna. Now we'll next place down our Kaguya. We'll activate the sand I mentioned first, and we need to do sand, ice into sand. Now that we have a lot of ore stacks on our Smith, upgrade him to his masterwork tiers, and then place the Sword of Actuation on our Ragna. And then finally we do have our Witch that we will place down as well. Now all we need to do right now is basically just wait for Kaguya to be able to use all of her domains. So we need to do ice now. All we need to do now is sand, and then we have to wait for him to attack to get the buffs from the stunning, and then we just replace him. We go, wait out one more attack. See what it comes to. All right, we are just going to replace them. We may have lost out on some damage. Maybe the familiar buff didn't go through properly, but that is fine. We have done the first stacking. Now we need to do this 2 more times. So I will be back once I have done that. All right, and we are finally back. It did take a little bit of time to set it all up and do everything, but if we go ahead and check our Ragna, as you can see, he's still at a 20 times damage multiplier. This is crazy to see how high of damage that he can get. Nearly 600,000. We should be able to get 600,000 if we do activate the sand dimension. There you go. 600,000 every 3.2 seconds is crazy. Looking at the display alone, 180,000 to 170,000, you know, going up and down. That is absolutely crazy. He doesn't really have too much of a downside with the nose familiar as well, because of the holy buff that he has, which reduces status effect by 50%. So it's only a 1 second stun instead of a 2 second stun. So yeah, that is going to be showcasing him with 6 units. Absolutely crazy how high we can get the damage multiplier with all of this. Now what we're going to do next is see how high we can get it with unlimited amount of unit slots. All right, so from all of these that I currently have, the first thing that we need to do is actually go ahead and bring in an Armin. Armin does give a buff, but it's on a specific spot. So this first spot that we need to place, it just needs to be close enough. It does not need to be on top, and then we'll get consumed for that 20% damage buff that Armin does give. And now from here, we can start working on placing all of our other units down. These units do not matter to be in range. We need to set up our Astolfo again, which I'll do later, but first let's go over all of the units that I need to put on the team to buff. So first off, we have Hercule. Hercule does give a buff whenever he does get a crit, and this needs to be when he is at least upgrade 7. He gives a 10% attack and a 15% crit damage buff, which doesn't make him stack crit damage, but it does give him it to him, so it is quite nice. Although I have heard that it's not working properly, but still we have a 10% damage buff coming from Hercule, which is pretty nice. Next on the list is Orihime. Orihime does give a, I believe, 15% damage buff, as you can see right there, and she can cleanse, but that we are placing her down for that 15% damage buff. Next, of course, we have Rin, the original buffer in the game. She gives a 18% damage buff and a 10% range buff once she does max out her waves. So if we go boom, 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 there we go, 10% range. Moving on to the next buffer. The next one we have is Rudius. Rudius gives a 15% damage buff and a 10% range buff for 30 seconds once his mana falls below 15%. So I'll go ahead and chuck this on 25%, and hopefully that should consistently allow him to buff. Next we have Aladdin. Aladdin is able to do a 25% damage buff and a 10% range buff whenever he cleanses a debuff or status effect off a unit. Next, of course, we have Delusional Boy. He is from the Sid raid. This is the pre-Evo Sid, and he gives a 10% damage buff and a 5% range buff. Next up, we have Subaru. Subaru on placement gives a 8% range buff and a 10% damage buff, and then we upgrade him, use his ability, and he'll give an additional 10%. Second to last, we have Fubuki. She does give a 5% SPA buff, which is not a whole lot amount, but it does pair well with Ragna, so I'll just put her at max so she has enough range for whenever I do move around my Ragna. And then last but not least, the last buffer unit that we do have outside of the ones that we have in our inventory is, of course, Yuhaba. Yuhaba does give a buff on one of his toggles, so if I go ahead and place him down, max him out, here we go, and then I toggle once, this should buff all of the units in range by 15%, and he himself loses 30% damage. So now from here, I just need to do my remaining buffers, but from here I will be back once I have gotten to the final placement of Ragna, because this is going to take a while. All right, and here we are on the final placement. This took a while. I'm sure I actually missed out on a couple of buffs, but all we need to do now is go ahead and pop our Kaguya dimension one more time, and let's see what his damage is looking like. Oh my goodness, 800,000 damage with a 1.8 second SPA. Now I actually don't know what his attack animation timer is, so this might be, I think this might be lower than how much he's actually attacking by. So yeah, I don't know the full DPS, but we're just looking at his stats alone, nearly 500,000 DPS. Now, of course, this is completely impossible unless you have everyone in a party that is bringing one of these units. But yeah, that is absolutely crazy to see what one unit can do with every single buffer in the game. But yeah, that is pretty much it. This was, of course, only just showcasing the power that Nose plus Witch is on Ragna, and then doing a little bit of a fun moment, seeing how high we can get Ragna. Ragna is still, of course, an amazing unit. Pretty good, honestly, really good, especially with the Nose and Witch pairing, because beforehand it was kind of just too slow to build up a lot of damage multiplier on him. But with this new familiar and Witch alone, like, he can really get to his max placement a lot sooner than needing to farm up and like place other supports down. Like, you pretty much only just need to use him. Smith does help quite a lot, but in most wave 15 game modes, you're only going to be getting roughly around 200 to 290 at the highest amount of kills. So most of the time you aren't going to be using Masterworks. So most of the time the best thing to do is get to silver weapons and probably use the minus 10% SPA for 80 ore, and then maybe see if you can get yourself a silver sword. Or the other thing is ignore the SPA, go to his first upgrade and only just use bronze swords, because it's 20 ore for 20% damage. It is 5% less than a silver sword, and it is 60 ore less. So it's pretty easy to be able to cap out on all of the damage from this as well. So yeah, that is pretty much it. I appreciate it if you have watched this far through the video. Maybe you've learned something interesting from this. But yeah, since Nose is working again, I will go ahead and probably do my guts video, and then I might also do a Griffith video going a bit more in depth on those two. Those will both be separate videos. I do have some other videos in mind, but yeah, appreciate it if you have watched this far through the video. See ya.